Hello, this is RJ Sullivan. I'd like to thank InConStasis, the organizers of this event, for asking me to do a reading today. So just keeping it all on the up and up. The sunlight probably gives this away, but this is not technically live, although I will say what I've decided to do to make it as live as possible is I've hit record and I'm just going to let this whole thing play through. And however it comes out because that's how it would be if I were in front of you. So I'm going to read a short story today. Before I do that, I'm going to make a few announcements. First of all, this is an interesting time for me. There's a lot of things going on right now. If I were at InConJunction this weekend, I would have my booth up and I would be selling my books as usual. As it happens, my books are between publishers. These are the sorts of things you never planned for, but that's what's happened right now. So most of my paranormals are going to move to the Dark Whimsy book label, which is my own self-publishing label. And I'm very thrilled, excuse me, I'm very thrilled to announce that the Red Lotus books, of which, well, there's one right now. It was always intended to be a series, but those are going to Hydra Publications, run by Tony Acree, who is a regular at InConJunction. I'm sure many of you know who that is. So this is the first place I've announced that. I will say that the conversation about Red Lotus started a year ago at the InConJunction event, which is one of the things that obviously we're not able to do, is authors and publishers are not able to network with each other. But that started a year ago and it has concluded in the recent weeks, so there'll be lots of things announced about that. Typically, I do some sort of birthday celebration. I am turning 52 July 6th. That is Monday after this event. If you go online and you're following me, you'll see that one of the horror authors, friends of mine, is she's also an extremely good singer. Her name's Jessica McHugh. She's going to sing Time After Time, one of my favorite songs, for my birthday. That's going to be an online Facebook event. If you get on my page and look for that, that should be a whole lot of fun. She also has a brand new release of a Frankenstein Blackout Poetry, which I'm going to give her a chance to talk about during that event. That'll be Monday night. Let's see. I feel like there's something I'm forgetting. Some of you have probably seen that John Allen and I have restarted the Two Towers Talk Show. That's a movie and TV review blog. We'll also be interviewing members in the industry as those opportunities come up. That's relaunched in the last couple of months during the COVID situation, has allowed that to become a more virtual situation, and actually in some ways has made that easier. So I hope that some of you go check that out. So finally, in order to order books from me, which you can, go to rjsullivanfiction.com and click the tab at the top that says order books directly from RJ. I have several copies of each book which were ordered before the pandemic, and I'd love to sign them over and give them a good home for you folks. I have several titles to choose from, lots of fun stuff. Feel free to check that out after the reading. So for today, I have chosen a short story of mine that came out recently. It appears in the Short and Twisted Western Tales book. That may be backwards, but there you go. What are you going to do? This is edited by Becky Burkheart and came out, I believe, shortly before the holidays, maybe very soon after. But this is a short story entitled Defiled. And as it indicates, this is a weird Western. I do want to talk about the main character in here. There's a tricky line here, walking between respect for the natives, the Native Americans, and their situation and the horrible things that they've been through in our past, and also playing upon the Western tropes. I mean, there's lots of questions as to whether or not the West, as is portrayed in books in Hollywood, even existed at all. But I tried to put together a Native American character that I think is respectful to their people, while at the same time acknowledging I do play upon some of the Lone Ranger type tropes and some other things. Some people may think that I was less successful than others. I will leave that to you to judge, but just keep in mind this is written with those tropes in mind and with an attempt to be respectful to that. I'd like to think I wrote that line pretty well, so I'll leave it for you to decide. So without any further ado, I see we're 6 minutes in, and it's time for me to read Defiled, a short story. Take one drink and get into it. I appreciated that the white man saved my life, but in the days that followed, I regretted it. I'd wrapped up trading supplies for my tribe at the mercantile. As usual, I tethered 3 horses and rode the lead horse into town. Sometimes, a brave accompanied me. If I had to, I'd go alone. I knew the town, and many trouble-free supply runs had made me careless. This night, I rode alone. Our cluster of adobe dwellings stood in the open sun beyond the perimeter of Wickenburg, Arizona, a white man town in what they called the Arizona Territory. Here, my people, I'm going to butcher this, the Hipitashinimu, and I did research that, shortened by the white man's tongue to Hopi, had farmed the dry land for countless seasons. All around us, white men and red men clashed in open hostility. The people of Wickenburg and my village ignored this as best we could. The owner of the store could resell necklaces, pottery, and skins made by my people, while I traded for tools, medicines, and other supplies for my village. He'd haggled, and I'd lingered. As I led the horses past the outcropping of rocks east of town, a bandit stepped out. 2 more approached from behind. Before I could react, 3 pistols pointed at me. "Hands up, Injun, nice and slow. Drop your weapon." My knife, strapped to my belt, was better suited to chopping brush than defending myself, and I was too far away to make a break for my village. I removed the stone blade and dropped it in the dust. They rummaged my packs. They argued about whether to hang me, burn me, or, quote, scalp the red man the way his kind done us. They were still arguing when the first shot rang out. The man before me dropped, and even as I crouched, 2 more shots rang out, and the others collapsed. I grabbed my knife and rose. A stranger on horseback pointed his gun at me while he sized me up. In the last rays of sunlight, the eyes of the pudgy white man glittered with madness. A grin flashed across his face. "At ease, Injun." He holstered the pistol. "I was setting up camp when I heard voices." After a short pause, he added, "Looks like I just saved your life, Injun." He dismounted, closed the distance, and held his hand out. I hesitated, then clasped it. "Name's Corey Wolf," he offered. "Among my people, I am Dasa Doha. White men call me Dasso when they're not saying red man or Injun." He laughed, a harsh sound, and indicated a satchel with camping gear. "Fair enough, Dasso. I was hoping to hire a good scout. How's your tracking skills?" I paused. I owed him my life and the truth. "I have not scouted for many seasons, but I know how to travel by sun and stars, and I can live off the land." Corey cackled again, the sound of one possessed. Would you be inclined to travel a ways with a white man? As I checked my supplies, I debated, telling him that my late wife was a white woman, a teacher from town, and the most noble spirit I'd ever known. She died giving birth to my only son, who joined her soon after. But this stranger did not need to know that. I answered, I have no hate in my heart. How'd you come to be by yourself? As I checked my supplies, I recounted my haggling with the mercantile. Corey approached his pack. Break bread with me, Dasso. Got plenty for both of us. And I have a deal for you. His deal was easy enough. Meet him back at the rock outcropping in 3 days when the sun was at its highest. I was to bring weapons for hunting and supplies for a long trek. He said he feared he'd meet other Indians. I did not know if I could help him if this happened, but I owed him that much. When I delivered the tribe's supplies to the chief's wickiup, I told him of my encounter and that I expected to travel for several days. Coming from anyone else, he might have been shocked, but he only shook his head and bid me a safe journey. For many summers, he'd treated me as the rest of the tribe, like a puzzle he could not solve. As a man of peace at a time of impending war, he had far greater worries than my self-imposed exile. I'd met Abigail Hartley as a young brave. She'd arrived in town as a schoolteacher, newly arrived from the east. She'd visit our tribe to teach us the white man's tongue. I could speak well enough, but she spoke with an eloquence different from the others in town. Abby insisted, "Someday your tribe will need to speak for itself." She placed her hand on my chest. My heart beat strong against her palm. "You will speak clearly and plainly. Your words could convince white soldiers to lower their guns and regard you as their equal." I'd scoffed at the idea that we could speak our way out of the great conflict we could all see coming, but on that day, Abby spoke clearly and plainly, and her words stole my heart. Abby had no family in town to offend. My chief, for his part, took the news of our desire to marry well enough, though such pairings were frowned upon. Our chief convinced the tribe's women to build us a new wickiup as a wedding present, located some distance from the tribal grouping, so Dasso's wife could easily welcome town visitors, the chief said, to justify their actions. I still reside in our home, comfortable to be part of the tribe while existing separately from it. I waited atop my horse. Wickenburg lay visible in the valley below. The town had developed quickly near a coal mine. The promise of prosperity to white men willing to work hard drew them from the east. So far, the town showed no interest in the land we'd farmed for countless seasons. Rumors reached us from all around. Rumors of reservations, talk of Indian warriors attacking settlers, but the white man's civil war had sent most of their soldiers back east. The white man's laws had defiled the red man and the black man, and now the white man defiled himself. I pondered this. Then the air erupted in gunshots, and my thoughts returned to the present. A lone rider fled from the town, toward me. I prayed that this was not Corey Wolf, but then I saw other riders pursuing. Moments later, Corey drew to a stop. He glared and screamed, "Time to ride, Injun! Hell's on my tail! Show me how to shake 'em!" I pointed my horse toward his pursuers and gripped the reins, but Corey drew his gun. "Don't! You'll be dead before your horses take 2 steps." I rode the opposite direction, and he followed like a crazed shadow. I cursed Corey under my breath. Whatever his crimes, our fates were now tied. I guided my burden and his pursuers to a stony canyon of jutting rocks. The hard ground would hide our tracks, and we would double back and wait. With some luck, our pursuers would ride past. I held my breath as their horses' hooves closed in, then rode past. Corey let out a laugh, an unpleasant sound. "Quick thinking, Dasso. I knew I brought you along for a reason." My stomach nodded. "What did you do, Corey Wolf?" Corey shook his head. "Was supposed to be a simple bank robbery, then we'd ride to Mexico at our leisure." His voice did not match the regret of his words. damn sheriff interfered. Had to plug him with lead. You killed the lawman? Anger flared. I knew Sheriff Griffin as a fair man. In many ways, he assured troublemakers did not harass our village. I cannot help you anymore. Corey drew his pistol. His answer to everything. Hell you say, Injun. Plans ain't changed. We hightail it to Mexico. You scout for me. We just ride a bit faster. Then he said what I'd already realized. If they return without us, they'll hail the Rangers, and that bunch will be hot on our ass as soon as we hear a lawman was killed. As soon as they hear a lawman was killed. He flashed his crazed smile. But don't you worry none, Injun. You get me to the border, you're free to return, just like I promised. I ignored his promise, knowing nothing good would happen to me, but I had no choice. And we're between scenes, so I'm going to take a quick drink. We rode for 3 days. I considered fleeing, but he tied my hands and took my knife every night. I didn't hate him for this, because I would have fled if I could. With no choice but to keep my word, I guided us to the spring of great blessings. I had not seen the water hole for many seasons, back when I was a young scout. Our rides to the south of more than 3 days... let me restart that. On rides to the south of more than 3 days, we rode to this natural oasis surrounded by green growth and wildlife. If the spring still existed, we could fill our canteens and hunt fresh game. As we neared, we closed in on the black smoke of a campfire. The water hole came into sight, and Corey breathed in a series of strained wheezes. Good thinking, Injun! Corey prodded his horse to a gallop. Corey prodded his horse to a gallop. Now well ahead of me, he pulled to the edge of the spring and dismounted. He threw off his hat and fell face down into the water. I pulled up alongside his horse, fighting a reflex to vomit. He gulped greedily. His sweat and dirt defiled the purity of the spring. Revolted, I turned away and noticed the nearby structures. 3 dwellings of what looked like new, sturdy wood stood several yards apart from each other, but clearly part of the same grouping. A wooden sign of carved letters hung from the awning of the closest building. Freshen Spring Trade Post. A second hand-painted sign near the door added Food, RX, Booze, and Other Stuff, and that's spelled BOOZ, Other STUF. Behind it, further into the only green valley for many miles, stood a stable. Black smoke bellowed from a hole in the roof of the campfire I'd spotted from a distance. The repeated clank of a hammer on metal reached me. Beyond that, the grass turned greener still, and I could make out a farmhouse and rows of crops. As I took this in, a tall, lanky man stepped out of the trading post. The man held a pistol in one hand, but gripped it loosely, as if this was a role he'd played too many times already. A black settler's cap perched askew over thick brown hair. I dismounted and raised my hands, palms out, to show I meant no harm. Corey's slurps filled the air. The tradesman offered me a look of empathy. He seemed to understand the injustice that I should stand subordinate to such a creature. Corey finished his gorging and stood. He dipped his hat into the water and put it on. The water poured over his face, down his neck, and soaked into his clothes. He blinked water from his eyes. His thickened lashes added to the stupid look on his face. He nodded to the tradesman. Howdy. Name's Corey Wolf. Corey started to extend his hand, but the tradesman shook the gun at him. Corey's eyes flashed anger. This here red man is Desodaha. He said it slowly, as if to a child. You don't need to worry none about him. The tradesman's eyes met mine, and I knew that he and I shared the joke. Wasn't worried about the red man, the trader explained as he holstered the gun. We welcome everyone, Mexican, white man, red man, Chinese. Everyone's our friend at Freshen Spring. Even the engine riders keep it friendly. But don't be fooled. We'll defend ourselves if need be. Ourselves, echoed Corey. I knew his casual tone clouded his meaning. Then you're not alone? Name's McHale, Norton McHale. I run the trading post. Lots of supplies for you. I take Mexican dollars, I take American dollars, Mexican pesos, or good trades. His gaze met Wolf's. Got booze if you're so itching. McHale turned his back and walked toward the store. Corey glared. His evil grin flashed, then vanished. How about you, Injun? Little fire water before we mosey on? My inner dread rose. I'd like to see the man's goods. As we followed McHale, I spoke at his back. I was last here with a hunting party perhaps 10 summers ago. I left my question unasked, but McHale understood. It's changed a lot, all right. The Bennetts set up their farm down a ways 3 years ago. I came after them, and then the blacksmith. His name's Jason Holmes. If your horses need shoeing, he can set you right. Could say we're all business partners. We followed McHale into the trade store. I drifted among the goods. I noticed many tribe hangings, paintings by Mexicans, white men, and my people, plus food stock and other supplies, both necessaries and oddities. 2 sharp noises startled me and drew my attention to the back counter. McHale regarded the pair of shot glasses he had slammed down on the bar. He struggled with the bottle. Try this, he said, addressing Corey. Bourbon straight from Kentucky. Great stuff. Fellow from town traded me 3 bottles just last week. Got 1 left, he winked as he uncorked the top. But not 'cause I sold 'em. Corey probed. How far is the closest town? Not far. There's another trade post about half a day east. Wickenburg's the first town, 3 days another way, Corey said. You were saying about your neighbors. McHale tipped his head and drained his glass. From the cackle that followed, I guessed this was not the first drink since sunup. We're not in business together, not as formal as that. Trade post is all mine, but we watch out for each other. A tribal hanging drew me in. I recognized the mark of a tribal medicine man. Farmers want protection, said McHale, and I always wanted to set up a store here. Then the blacksmith came along. We band together. Guard the spring. Keep it open. Already had to drive off some rascals a couple of times. Where did you get this? I asked, motioning to the tribe mark. That? Sure. I remember, but it's not for sale. Only thing that's not. First person I ever had walk into the store. Tell me, I prompted. An old red man came in, and I'm talking ancient, dried skin like the desert. He hung it on the door before I could stop him. Said it marked me and mine as a protector. Told me to never take it down. I looked away, and when I looked back, he was gone. So, prompted Corey. They's just you, the blacksmith, and the family? Seems lonely. The painting seemed to reach out to me. From some other place in my mind I heard the words of the old man. This symbol marks you and yours to the Great One. He will know yours as the mortal protectors of the blessed spring. The Great One will grant the protectors the strength they need to keep the water pure and deliver vengeance to any who seek to defile it. I stood, caught in the waking dream, for several precious seconds that would haunt me for the rest of my life. When I next saw the tradesman, he was looking down at his shot glass, pouring himself another drink. Corey had already drawn his pistol. What if I'd looked up sooner? What would I have said? What would I have done? But I could only call out, No! Useless, pointless, a warning spoken far too late. Corey fired. McHale folded and fell against the wall. His body rattled the bottles, bags, and hangings. Debris toppled from the shelves, glass shattered, bags of supplies burst open, their contents defiled. I stepped forward, but his eyes stared at the ceiling, lifeless. A packet of flour had burst near his head. White coated his face and chest. Fury burned within me. I'd spun toward Corey, but he'd already aimed his gun at me and spoke through a grimace. Well, that was easy. In my shock, I babbled, "Why, Corey? Why did you do this?" "We got rangers on our tail. We can't leave witnesses to tell them about us." My head spun. "So you'll leave a trail of the dead?" "Course not. We bury the bodies. Leave it abandoned." He cocked his head. A look came over his face like a sick dog. His eyes widened. "I hear something." The door burst open. A young man charged in. Broad-shouldered, he was a true creature of the sun. Hair bleached blonde, skin and... hold on. Book slipped. He was a true creature of the sun. Hair bleached blonde, skin and bare chest bronzed. His eyes fixed upon me, and he charged. He raised a muscled arm. His fingers clasped the handle of a large metal hammer. He screamed a battle cry as he leapt. In a panic, I scrambled away. More gunshots burst the silence. Red marred the man's chest, and he collapsed to the floor. The hammer dropped at my feet. Blood spilled from the fresh corpse and sprayed the floor. Without effort, the dead man's name came to me, Jason Holmes, a man who learned a trade skill and who would now fit for nothing but feeding the vultures, just like Norton McHale, a man who told me his name. Corey snarled at the body. "Great distraction, Injun." His cackle rang in my ears. "Think the farmers heard the shot?" The farmers! The family who'd uprooted to tend this land. I swallowed back my sickness. "Let's just go, Corey. We can ride. I'm not leaving no witnesses, hear me? None." His look said more to me than he intended. I, too, was a witness. Between scenes, another drink. Hope you're digging it. All right, let's get back to it. Corey headed for the door, as did I, to cut him off. Corey waved his gun in warning. "Not so fast, fella. You say one word, you cry out, you so much as utter a peep, and I'll lay you out flat. I can do it." I stepped aside. He lowered his gun. As he walked past, he clasped me on the shoulder with his other hand and stepped ahead of me. I thought to attack, but fear held me back. "Relax, Injun. I still need you to get to Mexico. I don't want to kill you unless I have to." He bolted out the door, and by the time the door swung back on its hinge, he'd already run off toward the farm. I sprinted after him. I left the dead behind to follow a trail destined to lead to more death. Corey, already several yards ahead, closed in on the farmhouse. I expected him to sneak. Instead, he walked boldly up to the wood fence and hurtled the minor obstacle. I spied movement from the house. A small man stepped off from the front porch, a gunshot in his hand. "You just stop right..." Two quick shots blasted the tiny man off his feet. The farmer's shotgun, now pointed at the sky, fired an impotent blast, an unheard appeal to the unfair verdict. I staggered toward the scene, dizzy, my senses overwhelmed. Wolf stood over the body, his face cold and unreadable. By the front door, something else moved. I saw her before I heard her scream. The woman stared with round eyes of terror, then turned and bolted for the shelter of the house. Corey also saw her and charged toward the home. "Corey, no!" I'd found my voice. He already stood before the door. As I drifted past the body of the dying husband, he cried out, "Stop him, please." Then the farmer's death mask froze his stare, his eyes locked open at the sun. Corey kicked at the door. It broke in with a crash, and he vanished into the house. Even as I stepped through the front, I heard the woman's squeal cut off short by a shot. Dead weight struck the floor, followed by silence. Corey had caught up to her as she tried to flee out the back door. She lay, sprawled, her young, once pretty features defiled by the blast that tore away hair, skull, and face. Her mouth hung open, and her one good eye froze in a final look of terror. I looked at the crumpled form and stifled a sob. I recalled the late-night ramblings of young braves who said they longed to stand over freshly scalped white victims. Our chief always stopped such foolish talk. Our braves had never seen what I now witnessed. Slaughter, real and sickening. Victim after victim, dead for no reason, not even for hatred. Would those warriors feel the same revulsion that churned within me now? We lingered in the carnage, the wolf, the woman, and me. Time stretched, and then an infant's wail broke the silence. The cry came from across the cabin. As he turned toward the sound, Corey's eyes widened. Unnaturally calm, I stepped forward, one hand on my knife. No. Fury distorted Corey's face. I did not relent. I waited, uttering a prayer for mercy should I die today. Then the moment changed. Corey's mad grin returned, and he holstered his gun. "That's fine, Dasso. I ain't gonna kill no baby. What do you think I am?" "I think you're an inhuman monster." "Watch yourself, Injun." His upper lip curled. "What are you gonna do? Block till the baby starves to death?" "I want your word, Corey. No more killing, or you find your own way past the Rangers." His brow furrowed. "All right, Dasso. Tell you what. The baby is yours." He pointed, jabbing with his finger at my chest. "You want to save it? You need to keep it quiet. You feed it. You share your food. Can you do that?" The moment lingered. Finally, Corey yelled, "I got no beef with a child that can't even talk yet, Red Man. Now, one of us has got to move." "You stay here. I'll see to the child." Corey shook his head. "Fine. Then get your ass back outside. Work's not done." With that, he stepped away and out the back door. All right. Another drink. Back to it. Whew. A breeze rose from the nearby spring, entered through the open window, and caressed the air. The crying came from a wooden cradle set at the foot of the bed. I picked up the wiggling life. Little hands and feet batted against my face. Dark hair and dark, innocent eyes lit up as the infant smiled and emitted a coo. I vowed I would save this child. I peeked beneath the cloth diaper. Dry and unsoiled, the gunshots must have wakened her. I rocked the little one and sang her a lullaby of my village that spoke of peace and blessings. Even as she quieted, I panicked. How could I possibly keep the child quiet and not draw Corey's wrath? As I sang, I closed my eyes and offered a prayer to the Great Spirit. Help me find some way to save this innocent life. The child's eyes closed, and her breathing steadied. A miracle? Or dumb luck? I didn't ponder the point, but I gently laid the bundle back into her cradle. Wolf waited outside, still glaring. He held out a shovel. "You got bodies to bury, Injun." "They are not my bodies." "I ain't digging no hole when I have you here." He moved a step past me, but I blocked him. He shoved at me, but I stood firm. "You will not add the child to your slaughter." He leveled his pistol at me. I stood firm. A baffled look fell over his face as he wrestled with my rebellion. After a long wait, his crazed smile reappeared, and he holstered his gun. "Your labor for the life of the infant. Deal. You first." He scoffed and turned his back. "My word's good, Red Man. I won't hurt the baby if you do as I say." All right. Scene break again. Despite the heat and the sand, in a short time I dug a hole beyond my waist. Blisters built up in my hands, but I ignored the pain and set to my task. While I attended to my labors, Corey had gathered the fruits of his. I paused to view the lineup of the dead. The metalsmith lay in the sand, eyes closed. Corey deposited the hammer next to the corpse. Stained with blood, we could bury the hammer in the same grave as the bodies to hide all evidence of his crimes. Next to him, twin looks of horror from the husband and wife accused me of my crime every time I glanced their way. Want to spill that. Wolf dragged tradesman McHale's shell over and dropped it next to the others. The stench of their bowels reeked from them. I resumed my task, accustomed to labor in the heat of the day. Corey, meanwhile, often stopped to mop his soaked sleeve across his puffy face. I expected him to seek shelter, but he squatted on his haunches and perched at the edge of the hole to watch me. I kept him at the edge of my sight. I feared he would go for the child while I worked. Soon the edge of the hole met my chest. "That's enough, Injun." Corey drew his gun and pointed it. The action froze my limbs. I fought stiffness in my legs and forced my rebellious body to turn to face my death with dignity. Corey flashed a crazed grin. "We both know where this is going." I'd hoped better of you. If he understood my insult, his face did not register. "Way I figure it, if I don't do it now, I just gotta dig another hole later." "And the child?" I swallowed back bile. Corey cackled. "I ain't taking no crying infant with me." "Damn shame, but better I put it out than it lay there." I spied movement behind Corey. A hand twitched. The metalsmith. I tried not to stare as the metalsmith's hand gripped tight on the hammer. Jason Holmes was doing what the white man called playing possum. I asked, "Will you let me leave the hole and stand on two legs like a man?" I knew his answer, but I wanted his attention on me. "Aw, hell, you're already down there, Injun. I want you to know it's nothing personal. I suppose you're a decent enough fella as red men go. And you, Corey Wolf, are the most despicable man I've ever met, of any sort." To my astonishment, he craned his head back and laughed. As he cackled at the sun, the farmer also sat up. His chest still leaked purple through his clothes, but Bennett bent his legs and rose on 2 feet. As I stared, astounded at the sight, his wife also sat up. Her one eye glared. The dead were rising. "Enough, Injun. Time to..." The farmer stumbled forward to close the distance. His hand grasped Corey's shoulder. Corey grimaced. His hand jerked. His pistol now pointed up. The shot meant for me instead exploded at the sky. The concussion spurred me to move. I took 2 steps, hopped, and pulled myself up over the edge of the hole. I lay on my stomach, flat against the ground, a lone witness to the unspeakable. Farmer Bennett shook Corey. Corey struggled and squealed. He now faced the metalsmith, whose immense fingers tore at Corey's neck. Stuck between pages. Here we go. Corey fired twice more, sending twin bullets to tear away chunks at the blacksmith's chest. The body jerked, but it pressed forward. "Injun, help me! Dasso! Please!" As I sat up, Trader McHale, also on his feet, closed in on the struggle. Ghostly white powder still marred his face and clothes. "No! No!" Hands grasped at Corey. Fingers tore flesh. Corey's cries turned to gurgles and chokes. Corey's gun dropped into the sand. As I stood, Jason Holmes's fingers clasped tight around the hammer. Then his arm rose. I wanted to look away, but I didn't. The first blow struck Corey's face. His gurgles turned to a scream. The second blow sent chunks of bone flying, along with several of the teeth he showed whenever he flashed his mad smile. The corpses stopped their struggles, and in a moment that stretched to eternity, simply stood and regarded their work. They'd shattered Corey's face, twisted his neck, his eyes still bugged out from the terror of his final moments. Then, in a unified effort, the three grabbed the slack body and threw it into the hole. I braced myself. With a sigh of escaping air, the metalsmith toppled into the hole atop the bandit. With a slow, staggering march, the tradesman stepped to the edge of the grave. His glassy eyes met mine. He offered a final grunt. Then he, too, toppled into the hole. Mrs. Bennet had stood apart from the carnage, focused on the farmhouse. Her single eye peered with palpable urgency. The infant's wails concentrated my focus. Whatever void held her spirit, Mrs. Bennet regarded me with an alert stare. At the edge of the hole that would soon be their grave, her husband also waited. I found my voice and spoke through a dry mouth. I will take care of her. A tear fell from her single eye to spill on the desert sand. A noise, a grunt, or perhaps a sob tore from her destroyed throat. On instinct, I dropped to my knees. When your daughter is old enough, I will tell her of you. Her shoulders slumped, and she turned toward her husband. The farmer opened his arms and held her in an embrace. Still clasped together, they dropped into the pit. I changed the child's linens and laid her back down, my legs shaking the entire time. In an hour full of miracles, the spirits granted me still one more. The child returned to her slumber. I filled in the grave and prayed over the souls lying there. As I turned from my vigil, the old gaunt mercantile man of my vision stood before me. He regarded me with a somber expression. He spoke in the tongue of our people. The mortal protectors are slain, and though the Great Spirit has avenged their deaths, the blessed spring is defiled. The spring must be purified, and the land must be cleansed. Accept your calling. As the Spirit spoke, I understood. Last scene break. As I looked through the window from within the trade post, 6 riders approached. My baby girl had drifted off for her afternoon nap in her cradle, behind the counter and out of sight. The others waited outside while a heavy-set Mexican entered. He wasted no time, but immediately identified his group as part of the Arizona Rangers. He asked me about Corey Wolf. Yes, I said. I've seen a man that matched his description. We shared some whiskey, and after a couple of glasses, he said he was headed for the Mexican border, I lied. Mucho gracias. Then you'll pardon me, senor, if it seems I have no time to waste. The lawman paused at the door. This chase has been hard, and our canteens are low. Would it be... You may fill your canteens, my friends, I said. Everyone is welcome. Take what you need to refresh yourselves and move along for the next travelers. This is the way of the blessed spring, and as long as I am its protector, it shall remain so. And that is Defiled, part of Short and Twisted Western Tales, which you can order off of Amazon, or you can order directly from me at rjsullivanfiction.com and click on the order books directly from RJ, and I will sign something to you. There's a website form to fill out, and you'll make your square payment at that time. And I've made it as easy as possible. Let's hope that next year we can do this in person. I hope that this is a success, but I certainly hope that this is not the new normal and we're able to get back to face-to-face interactions as soon as possible. I hope if you've made it this far, this runs about 45 minutes all total. I had a lot of fun doing this, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, RJ Sullivan. And that's about it. So I'm going to hit stop, and if you have any comments or questions, please send them my way. Thanks a lot. See you next year. Bye-bye.